every popular startup that you hear in the news and the press and so on and so forth, it's an absolute shit show inside. The reality of a startup is you need to make quick decisions with only having 20% of information available at that point of time. We rather make a wrong decision than no decision at all. Obviously, there are certain decisions you shouldn't get wrong, but in the end, it's just about fast iterations, just learning. If you are not yet a big company, your main advantage is speed. Whenever someone comes to me and is like, hey, Friday in 4 weeks, I'm like, why not tomorrow? That is really what drives the business forward. Stephen, my co-founder, the first conversation we had, he basically told me we solved heart disease. It's like, we know exactly medically how a heart attack builds up. We have all the diagnostic technology out there. The problem is just there's not enough accessibility, there's not enough education, there's not enough funding. Therefore, it's not accessible. And that was just for me absolutely mind-blowing. I was like, okay, let's do something about that. I think that's really meaningful. When you get started, you solve a very niche problem in a constrained niche market and then grow out of it. If you try to go at something that is very wide and big, it's very, very hard in the early days. You just don't have the whole solution ready. What we started with at Everlab was way too big to begin with.
Really?
Yes. Which could have and almost.
This episode is brought to you by Wix Studio.
Here at the Agency Podcast, we're building a community and we would love for you guys to be a part of it. So we would love to hear from you. What are you enjoying the most? What would you like to see more of? And what do you think might be missing? Drop a comment, make sure you subscribe. And now, on with the show. Marc, welcome to the Agency Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you here. And one thing I want to open up with, which is a little spicy, is that you've called the current medical system sick care instead of healthcare. Why?
I want to preface this with saying, I think Australia has a pretty good healthcare system, right? If you just look at life expectancy in Australia compared to most nations actually around the world. I had a conversation yesterday with someone who said Australia is actually one big blue zone, right? Like an area where people tend to live very, very long. It's really not about shitting on the existing system. I'm just saying, like most Western countries, we just have a demographic pyramid where people get older and older, and we have limited budgets. And I think in particular, if you look into Medicare, the budget is getting tighter and tighter. And I think you are currently in that moral dilemma where, if I have $1 to spend, I need to decide, do I spend that on an old sick person or a young healthy person? Well, you would morally be obligated to spend it on the sicker older person. And I think that is where a specific gap is. And what we're trying to do is really to turn things upside down and say, hey, actually, can we go to the doctor when we're still quote unquote healthy versus when we're actually sick? And I think that is, where I'm coming from.
And I would say that culturally, we currently look at our system somewhat as the hero archetype. So if you have an ailment, a sickness, or an illness, you would go to a GP or a doctor who then pulls you back from the brink, so
Absolutely.
to speak. Why do you think we value the rescue so much more than the maintenance?
Well, I think, again, we just have certain limitations, right? And I think if we look into healthcare in particular, I would say, you have very expensive human beings that are doctors, right? It takes a long period of time to train doctors. There's a limited amount of doctors out there. And again, you're kind of in this dilemma that, you have to do the best with the limited resources that are out there. But I do believe that we're moving into a new world. In particular, I think technology gives us the opportunities to flip the script here. And I think also just with the way that medical research is actually developing, we just learn more and more that unfortunately there are certain diseases that are silent, meaning you will not see certain symptoms before it's too late. And I feel like that's where a massive opportunity exists.
Now, if you zoom out to the entire medical system as it sits right now, what do you see as missing and what do you think is the next generation of health?
I think the biggest problem we have is really data. I think, if you look into pretty much every industry around us, data really is the key. I do think that one-size-fits-all solutions are very, very tough. And, same thing here. There are some preventative measures that are accessible actually for free in Australia, right? The problem is, again, you need to do it with certain commercial trade-offs, so to speak. So, this can be something like colonoscopies or like breast cancer screenings and co that are already covered by the state. Again, the problem is just that here you make a compromise, you decide for a certain age where these sorts of screenings are available for free. The problem though is like no two people are alike, right? Maybe in my particular case, my dad died from a heart attack. My grandpa had a heart attack. I am at high risk of a heart attack. So aggressive heart disease screening might make more sense for me at a younger age. Whereas, for example, for your family, it might be a specific cancer or something where your risk is higher. And I think for me, it's really about understanding each individual human, their particular risks and opportunities, and digging down there.
When you start looking at the data that the GPs track in their systems, CRMs, databases, and such, what have you witnessed that you feel is radically out of date when it comes to tracking data, like with your father and your grandfather and so on?
So I think the problem is just that it's not accessible, right? I think sometimes, as ironic as it might sound, I feel like the situation was better 20 years ago because people would usually still have that one family doctor they would continuously go to, right? So despite the fact that maybe it would have not been like very, very quantitative, still you would have one person that would see you over time and basically understand you. Most people you speak to today, they don't have their one GP anymore. And if you go to different doctors, basically you're really missing longitudinal data. And I think in particular in healthcare, of course, there's certain areas, specific blood tests. If you're in the red today, you're red today, and there's a risk and you can do something about it. But often it's actually more about the longitudinal trend, meaning if I just go in and I see a GP, they would usually lack a lot of context about me and therefore might be at risk of missing specific things.
And do you think that there's a future where you will be able to pull data from your family and be able to track things that maybe haven't appeared for you yet, but might show up in a database from years past?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand side, that's what the Australian government has tried to do with my health record. The problem is just that most people you speak to, that app is empty. The problem is this data is scattered across different providers in different formats, and very hard to make sense of. And that is, for example, one of the things we're trying to build with Everlab, and we actually found a way to access around, say, 80 to 90% of the last 30 years worth of pathology and radiology data, which is obviously extremely, extremely powerful.
Have you witnessed anything different between government initiative healthcare programs that track data and entrepreneurial-led ones?
Well, I think it's the age-old debate that I'm a big believer that the private sector is more efficient, right? Like I think it doesn't matter what kind of projects you look into, if you have that need to be commercial, to look at your bottom line, you tend to execute faster, you get to deeper results. So I think that is not a healthcare specific topic, but it's true for pretty much every industry out there.
Well, that totally makes sense. Now, when you think about preventative health versus, I guess waiting till something happens, do you feel like the industry is shifting that direction slowly, or is it hit a stagnation where people aren't quite sure how to adapt?
Well, I do think, again, right, like with advancements in technology, there are more medical breakthroughs. And I think in particular, you have advancements in diagnostic technology, for example. I think, look at stuff like MRIs or co, where you now have AI or image detection technologies that make it possible to detect a lot of things earlier than before. But yes, it's a big cultural issue, so to speak. And I think, talking to people, there is actually like great healthcare out there. It has been for a long period of time. The problem is just it's gate capped and it's incredibly expensive, right? You have very, very, very expensive boutique clinics and co, where, ultra personalized healthcare is practiced, has been practiced actually already for the last 10, 20 years probably. Again, it's just not accessible for the average Australian. And I think that's, again, where technology comes in and really gives an opportunity to change it. But yes, doing that across the quote-unquote legacy system is very, very hard. On average, it takes around 10 years for medical breakthrough to make its way into general practice. So things are just moving incredibly slow.
Now, if you look at health holistically, do you have a definition of how you like to look at it, or how you would like to redefine how people should be looking at health in today's day and age when it comes to prevention?
I think the interesting part right now is you kind of have these two worlds, right? You have the classic medical world, right? Like your GP, your specialist, etc. And actually, quite interestingly, if you anchor the customer in that world, people tend to be quite stingy. And you have the other world, which is more what I would call, wellness, fitness, supplements, etc. Right? And that's where people usually spend a ton of money, right? And I think in particular Australia, I think is one of the countries where the spend per GPT per capita is very, very high. The problem is these two worlds are not talking with each other, right? Obviously, if I go see, my GP, they would ask me some lifestyle questions, but it's just on a surface level. But I think, we have enough data that my lifestyle has massive influence on my health. So I think for me, like where we need to move is to more of a holistic definition of the term that is really encompassing everything from these two worlds.
Now, do you think that prevention, when you're trying to build a bridge between these two worlds, is a difficult sell, or have you found it easy?
Well, I think the problem is right now, and like we actually internally always speak about two terms, that is forward science and fringe science. And I think the problem is there's a lot of fringe science out there. And I think one, of course, right, people spend a lot of time on social media. You see all of these trends. I think in particular nutrition is, like one of these topics, and one person might swear that low carb is the best thing, and another one is vegan, and then the other camp is like, seed oils are the devil, and it's all carnivore. And again, I think, people lose themselves in some of these discussions. I think there's a lot of, just wrong information out there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you probably have, a medical profession that is sometimes maybe like a little bit too conservative and not really embracing, these medical breakthroughs. And I think that's exactly where we came in as a business, that we said like, hey, we actually want to build a fantastic medical service that is really clinically sound, that actually doctors want to work for. But on top of it, I think just build it around a brand that feels like a consumer brand that is welcoming for the customer and really, like opens their eyes to like what is actually possible.
Now, if you look at the industry and how people tend to look at hospitals and institutions, would you say that their, objective is to make gain or make profit? What's been your experience with this?
Well, again, right, like there are incentives in life, and obviously, right, the healthcare system is no different here. Obviously, you have a larger governmental component in here, but as I said before, even governments have specific budgets, right? They need to work on, and I think in the end, it's also an industry with, I would say, very, very thin margins. So obviously, right, like you need to make the right decisions, and yes, of course, right? Like you always hear the bad stories. Private equity firm buys private hospital chain, or same thing for elderly homes, for example, where I think you have obviously that moral dilemma, because they're real people with real impact, and you need to make the right decisions, but still run a business.
Yeah, if you think about it, on one hand, you can have bloated government agencies that are incapable or somewhat incompetent at using money effectively, and then on the other hand, you have companies and entrepreneurs that are more capitalistic. So then it's two different sides of the problem. Do you think that there's a way to bring harmony between these different sectors and how people can think about this?
Absolutely. I think for us, the way we started, and again, I think like building businesses in healthcare is incredibly tricky, because you have to navigate, the regulatory complexities. But I think for us, our long-term plan is really to say we can actually prove out that we're driving healthcare outcomes. And when I say that, let's just pick a simple example, right? Like, does it actually make sense to invest a couple of $1,000s into, Marc's heart health and prevent my future heart attack from happening? Or do I need to spend then 20 years of, governmental money on me treating me after a stroke or a heart attack, right? And I think, again, coming back, there's a lot of criticism out there about over-testing, running scans on healthy people. And to be honest, there's actually a lot of truth in that. But for us, it's really to say, hey, if we really take a very data-driven, personalized approach, we want to prove out that in the end, we will lower the cost for the system in the end. And I'm very, very convinced that if you use technology in a smart way, this is possible and will in the end benefit everyone.
Do you think that to bring the cost down, you have to go from the top down versus the bottom up?
Absolutely. Like, again, I think for us, when we started the business initially, I think our very first product was, around 10 grand, just because we had zero automation in there, right? So in the end, it took our doctors hours and hours and hours to, collect all of this historical data. And as I said, this is messy data, right? Like, this is in PDFs, and it's in different units, and you need to convert the units and so on and so forth. It's very, very complicated and just takes a lot of time. But as we progressed, as we built out the technology to basically automate all of these different steps in there, we were able to lower the prices of our service. And again, I'm really believing that it will be possible to do that even more going forward, and therefore, make it accessible for the everyday Australian.
What were some of the difficult challenges you had about consolidating that data initially? Because there's always the joke about doctors doing chicken scratch on notepads and such. How did you make sure that the data was accurate and you were doing it right?
Australia is pretty good when it comes to digitization. So in particular, the healthcare system, I would say Australia is up there. Sure, you have certain countries like maybe Singapore, UAE that are even further, but I would say probably Australia is in the top 5% already. Again, the problem is just that this data is scattered, and it just takes manual effort to get this data together and analyze it in co. But in the end, like, we would have not been able to build this business 5 years ago. It's really that, like, AI just had such leaps, and I'm one of the big believers that AI will change every industry everywhere. But I do believe that healthcare is one of the ones, and like, if you look, for example, into venture capital returns, healthcare is actually one of the worst verticals, in terms of
Really?
venture outcomes. Yes,
Yeah,
because it's just been incredibly tough regulatory environment. Lots of humans, payers you need to integrate in, right? Insurers, Medicare, they move very, very slowly, which killed a lot of startups historically. And now the time is ripe. You can do a lot with AI. You can do that in a safe way, and therefore then really make the difference.
if you want to grow your agency, you need more than just a website builder. You need Wix Studio, the all-in-one platform that's built to help you scale. Designed smarter in a hyper-flexible, responsive editor, cherry-picking whatever clients need from pre-built UI elements and templates. Deliver robust backends with built-in e-commerce solutions for every industry, letting self-maintaining infrastructure just run itself. Stop reinventing the wheel with every project and instead create a shareable design system with reusable assets, apps, and components. Clients growing too fast? No sweat. Wix Studio AI-powered CMS lets you turn a single layout into hundreds of additional dynamic pages. It's true, more clients no longer has to mean more chaos. Wix Studio gives you one centralized view of every project and makes real-time collaborations seamless. Do your agency's best work at scale. Build your next project on Wix Studio. Now, you've described the industry as somewhat full of landmines when it comes to bureaucracy, red tape, obstacles, hurdles. What was your mindset when you came into the industry, and how did you wrap your head around trying to tackle those initial steps?
Well, the first thing that was extremely helpful is my co-founder is a doctor, so I think going on that journey just as a business person. So like I studied engineering and business at uni. So I'm not a medical specialist, right? Like I'm the business guy in our business. So having a co-founder who's a doctor helped a lot, right? Like I think from day zero, like he just has the connections, he understands how the system works, he knows what good medicine is and what isn't. That was incredibly important to be able to rely on that. And then I think, just a step-by-step process. I sold a business before that. I was in the somewhat, great position to take a bit of time and decide what to do next in life. And I actually worked on a couple of different ideas, but in that process, just realized for myself, building business is pretty hard. And, if I go at this again, it needs to be something meaningful. And I mentioned it already before, like my dad died from a sudden heart attack when I was 13. And quite ironically, actually died after crossing the finish line at a half marathon. And it's just your typical example, mid-40s, zero symptoms, super healthy from the outside, and just unfortunately never saw a doctor. And, had some risk looming and just never got checked. So I think probably that like very deep personal mission alignment, made me opt for that idea and be like, okay, let's just give it a go and let's push through all of these hurdles and all of this red tape, because this is something that is just truly, truly meaningful for me.
It sounds like quite a deep why. What type of imprint did that have on you, being 13 and witnessing that?
Well, quite a lot, right? Again, right? I think it shapes you in the person you are. And I talked to a friend about that just last weekend, where I was like, I think every founder somewhat has this chip on their shoulder, right? Like, I think you need to be a bit crazy to go through that, to have the pain, to have things blowing up daily, to never really having a holiday, always being on. So no, absolutely, it made a crazy difference to me, in particular because it just came out of nothing, right? Like, I would say I had a very, very, very protected, upbringing, and obviously changed everything from one day to the other.
Was there a certain point in your life where you went from, yep, this is a chip on my shoulder, to now we're going to do something about it?
Initially, it was not really this like, I will do something, to help others or protect others from having the same fate. It was just more than like afterwards that when I was iterating on different ideas, someone introduced me to Stephen, my co-founder, and I still remember it like that. The first conversation we had, he basically told me like, we solved heart disease. It's like, we know exactly medically how a heart attack builds up. We have all the diagnostic technology out there. The problem is just there's not enough accessibility. There's not enough like education. There's not enough funding. Therefore, it's not accessible. And that was just for me absolutely mind blowing, right? And I was like, okay, like let's do something about that. That's really something that's truly meaningful.
And the dynamic you have between your co-founders is quite unique as well.
Yeah.
Do you mind just describing the dynamic? Because each of you brings like a Marvel superhero gift to the table, yours being entrepreneurship and business, and your co-founder being a doctor themselves. What has that done for the business? What has that done to contribute to your mission to help, I guess, prevent what happened to your father?
So would say that we're actually 4 co-founders in the business, so quite a large pool of founders, and we actually all didn't know each other for very long, which is also quite unique. So actually, when we raised our first round of funding, a lot of people were, very skeptical if this would work out, because as I said before, building a business is, there's lots of landmines, a lot of things going wrong, and you really need to hold together as a team. But I think the thing that is quite unique about us as a founding team is exactly that we have very complementary skill sets. So, with someone else who's coming from the engineering technical side, and then we have Sam who's coming from the ops side. And I think what really brought us together is just that like all of us were quite entrepreneurial, already had specific businesses, worked for other businesses beforehand. So I think just like a little bit more, experiences. I always tend to say, like, if you go at round 2, like my number one thing is just like I had so many things blowing up in my face in round 1 with my first business. You're just a lot more relaxed in a way because you've seen a lot of things. And I can tell you, like, there's been certain moments with my first business where things happen. I was like, okay, I now really don't have a solution anymore. But eventually you found a way around, and I think that kind of gives you a bit of like superpowers. You've just seen more, a little bit calmer. You maybe also like plan out a bit further. You maybe have a bit more. You have a bit more of a bigger vision. So coming back to the question, I think it's really that complementary skill set that like allows us to move very fast. I think we all know where the spikes are with the others, where I think we just have a lot of trust, right? Like, I did, study engineering as well, but I haven't touched code in a long time. So, like, obviously, when my co-founder Anshul has, like certain ideas, I fully trust him that this is the architecture we need to go for our patient management system. And I think that's what's working really well and what gives us superpowers to move extremely quick as an organization.
Now, if you look at the wellness market around the industry that you're now in, I would say the market's pretty crowded with apps, and the medical market is also crowded. You've got hospitals, GPs, you've got NDIS, you've got a ton of energy pointing at this space. How did you find the gap of where you could put this business?
Yeah, quite interesting, right? To your point, the two worlds again, right? You have the wellness world, where I would say, like, all in all, the specific companies, I think they spike in terms of the branding, maybe the experience, right? Like these days, I feel like every street corner you have a new sauna, ice plunge place opening up, right? It's the biggest trend of our times. But I think often these places are not really strong when it comes to the medical side of things. And, like, I do know that a lot of these wellness places now also try to offer medical solutions. Like I think blood test is kind of becoming one of these things. But when I talk to consumers, often it's just this notion like, yeah, I don't really trust them with their medical opinion, so to say. And then talking about the legacy system, I think it's just this like, yeah, very stuck in the old ways, focusing on reactive care and doing that really, really well, right? Like, again, to my point, I think Australian reactive care is really, really good. And I think also I have the privilege to talk to a lot of GPs. And to be honest, like being a GP is not the most glamorous profession in the medical field and also not the one that pays best. So most GPs I speak to, they're actually also deeply motivated by helping customers. The problem is just they're in a system where basically they're rewarded to churn through as many customers as possible per hour, right? Because that's how Medicare billing basically works. So therefore, I think that is a little bit of the sweet spot that we kind of said like, okay, how can we actually build something that touches both worlds, that is medically very sound, but that just also creates a great customer experience and just addresses, I think, like some of these customer demands out there where people just like, hey, I want to talk about my wearable data when I talk to my doctor as well, right? Like I want to get some more input that is, not just eat vegetables, but like deeper, how can I actually really optimize? And I think that's just where there were not many providers till date, and where I just think we, created something new that people seem to like.
And your experience with GPs and people in the medical space has been quite positive in this direction from your experience?
Yes, 100%, right? Like there is the odd person, again, to my point, you're over testing, like you just like make these people pay out of pocket for scans they don't need. But honestly speaking, I would say like all in all, the feedback has been very positive. My co-founder Steven actually also teaches at the college, and we now actually have more than 100 clinicians working for us, and these are all certified doctors. So clearly, seems like we're not the snake's oil salesman, but just have very robust medical frameworks, which I think proves us right. And I think beyond that, we just have a lot of medical data where we can prove out, yeah, sure, there's certain people we test and there's nothing. But actually for most people, even if we don't find a cancer or something, I would say in 90% of cases, we find something that this person can then use to make more informed choices about their lifestyle, right? It doesn't always have to be prevent the heart attack, prevent the cancer, but it can also be like, hey, how can I optimize my energy? How can I not have a crash after my lunch? And I think, again, obviously you can be negative and be like, oh, you just quote unquote wasted money, but a lot of people are just also, hey, I feel very relieved that there was nothing found.
Yeah, I think a lot of people live in uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking back to your father being 48 at the time, if he were here now, what do you think this would have allowed him to do had he had access to this?
We just had a customer 2 weeks ago, very similar case, 38-year-old like professional triathlete. Train 7 days a week, ultra fit, right? Like, resting heart rate, incredibly low, VO2 max, incredibly high, just fittest of the fittest. We did a CT coronary angiogram, which is basically the gold standard to detect plaque in arteries, because basically a heart attack is just plaque building up in your arteries and it clogs the arteries and then basically like can't pass through, and that's how a heart attack builds up. And he just had like a lot of plaque in his arteries, right? And it's exactly one of these cases where if that wouldn't have been detected, the heart attack would have happened. Maybe not in 2 months, but certainly over the next 5 years, so to speak. And quite interestingly with him, for example, like his cholesterol values, some of these more traditional blood markers that get checked were all very, very well placed. So with this particular case, right, like again, it's like one of these like humbling experiences where we basically, now that we know about this, he can take medication. In some other places where it's like really, really severe, you can, have surgery, but with that, basically save the life, and that's really, really cool.
How does that make you feel, being able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely amazing, right? We pulled some data before we did our Christmas party at the end of last year, and we had 114 life-saving findings just last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you find it there's a common thread of something that keeps popping up that you didn't expect?
I would say the findings in itself are expected because it's exactly the disease that, have the highest death rates in the general population, right? So heart disease, obviously number one killer in Australia. So that's also where we have most detections. And then also, like early, not even cancers, so to say, but for example, like just like polyps or something like that can be removed that would turn into cancer. So, metabolic health is often something which is not quote unquote deadly, but we all know that like poor metabolic health, diabetes and increases your risk of cancers and heart disease quite specifically. So, to be expected findings, but sometimes, I think that the shocking cases are just the ones where you find things in young, healthy people.
Now, with what you built with the gap in the market, you're saying you've been able to give people faster, easier, closer access to this type of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely.
What was not existent there before for people to have been able to do this and get these checks?
Either you would have to go to very pricey boutique clinics, or you would need like a referral from, like a GP or often even a specialist. And again, like you would only get that if there's already clear signs and symptoms, right, to get there. So the way we basically operate is we plug into existing healthcare infrastructure. So we collaborate with different providers. So for example, when it comes to like blood testing, pathology, we work together with Sonic Healthcare, one of the largest providers in the country, basically. So we give you a referral letter, you go there, you do your testing there, and then basically it all gets transferred into our systems, and our doctors basically debrief you on the results. Same thing applies for radiology and co. And also, I think one of the topics that is quite special about the service we offer compared to some others in the market is we also work together with specialists, meaning if we find an issue that really requires specialist treatment, we don't leave you on your own, so to speak, but we can actually, refer you out to a specialist that they can help you deal with these issues.
Because if you think about it, traditionally, it's usually a 15-minute consult. You sit there, the doctor asks, how do you feel? What symptoms do you have? They jot a few things down, Google a few things, and then give you some medicine. How does the 15-minute consult model actually make preventative care difficult?
Again, right? Like I think it's just about understanding someone deeply. It's not even so much, I would say, the 15 minutes. So like our doctors do take the time with our patients, but I think it's just more like what happens leading up to that consultation. So for us, sometimes it's also just like, the trickier stuff like gathering the historical data. But then it's just also, for example, we just ask you a bunch of questions in our app when you sign up with us, right? It's just like understanding a little bit better about your family history, your lifestyle, your behaviors, etc. And then basically like just gathering all of this data and just, finding patterns. And usually already if you have an onboarding consultation with us, we often find, your areas of risk without actually having to do a single test, which is quite cool, right? Like a lot of people already do, even if they just do Medicare bloods and not advanced panels, there's already often, trends we see by just collecting all of the data.
Now, entrepreneurially, as you're looking at this structure, how can you identify a gap in the market? How can you make sure there's a good product market fit and all these things?
Like it's quite interesting finding that sweet spot of the market is ready, because you can clearly be too early and then you just knock your head against the wall and just won't find a way, or being too late where the takeoff has already happened and you're just chasing behind, so to speak. I would say a big part of it is gut feel, to be honest. Just looking at things, doing some analysis. We looked at some market trends. So in the supplement case, for example, you clearly saw that the market was growing, and after talking to a few people here and there, we just also noticed, hey, the market is growing more from this mass market customer type, but people just didn't buy these products because they just looked so dodgy, right? And the same thing like now, right? There was just red tape that like the packaging, the brands were not really trustworthy, meaning, the average person, quote unquote, wouldn't touch these products. So there I was really like, okay, based on all of that, why don't we actually, produce products where, if you read the ingredient list, you can actually pronounce all of these ingredients and don't have, like 5 different sweeteners in there. And just also put it in a packaging that, evokes trust, that looks clean, that looks a bit more organic and co. So again, I think there's not this one formula. Also in this case now, right? Like I think there were some major trends. I would say number one, COVID definitely had an impact, right? I think it just, disrupted everyone's life, and everyone's suddenly like, hey, health actually matters, right? Like everything stopped, and if I don't have health, I feel like after COVID, people are just like a lot more health conscious to begin with. Then I think too, you just had all of these fitness trends that like pushed in there. Marry that with the advancements in technology and you saw it. But again, we could have also completely fallen flat. And to be honest, also when we raised our first round of funding, most funds investors we spoke to, they were like, this is something, for the richest 10,000 Australians out there. And now I look around and I look at our customers, like, this is actually insane. This is not like the 10% richest or like 1% richest, which some people said to us, but we actually see pretty much everyone coming through, right? And it can be from people that, exactly like my case, have a certain family history, are very anxious of their health, or, people that, fall into the biohacker camp and want to be the best version of themselves. So again, there were signs, but in the end, you then just, I think, have to go for it. And I think everything starts with a problem. Where you find that problem, obviously, I would say the best quote unquote problem market fit is usually like if it comes from you personally and your personal experiences. I feel this notion of, on a white piece of paper, doing some market research and building a business in an industry you know absolutely nothing about and you had no touch points. It is possible, but I think it is a lot harder to get into that because like often, right, like when you get started, you solve a very niche problem in a constrained niche market and then grow out of it. Usually if you try to go at something that is very wide and big, it's very, very hard in the early days, right? Because you just don't have the whole solution ready. So that is probably, I would say, like one of these like classic rules of, entrepreneurship and business building. Go for a niche market. And I think identifying these niche markets without any contextual know-how is quite hard. So I would say, doesn't matter if, you're a tradie or you work, as an investment banker, just look what are the problems you have day by day, right? Like what are the gaps, what could be more efficient, and dive into that. I think that's usually where you see the biggest successes start originating.
When you think of a niche, how do you round out what it is and what it isn't?
So I would actually argue that what we started with at Everlab was way too big to begin with.
Really?
Yes. Which could have and almost killed the business because we basically from day zero offered the whole suite of services, right? If you look into the US, for example, you see startups that got incredibly huge just by doing blood tests, right? And again, right, you need to coordinate with the labs, right? You need to see how data flows, etc. There's actually it's not as easy of just being like, go there and you get everything back. For example, in pathology in Australia, we have an average error rate of 10 to 15% in good cases, meaning someone misses a test in the lab, then you need to chase, you need to see if the sample can be rescued. Often they can't. You need to send your customer back in for a rebleed. People really hate getting their bloods taken. It's a horrible customer experience. So each of these little individual fields actually have a shit ton of complexity attached to them. We went live with bloods, with clinicians, with radiology, with physical assessments, with lifestyle advice, etc. So I actually broke my own rule there. We had a huge surface area, and again, servicing that without the technology, incredibly, incredibly hard. So again, I would usually say if you can cut it smaller, you have a better chance of building something that is truly helpful and a lot better than the status quo. That's just how I would approach it, right? Either it's cheaper or output is better, generates more revenue, connects into a new world. These are usually, I would say, the clues to go after.
How did having that much surface area almost kill the business?
Well, just distracted, right? You just solve so many problems at the same point of time. And in the early days, you just don't, as I said, we just didn't have the resources, right? So we just spread very, very thin. And as a result, the experience probably was not fantastic. It was very, very labor intense, created quite a few problems. Let's put it like that.
If you could go back in time, how would you have done it different?
It's hard now that it worked out, right? I would say, I would probably do everything the exact same again because now things are working really, really well and it worked out. But again, it was a very, very risky endeavor. And I think, for us, and that was quite a new experience for me as well in business building because our last company, right, with the supplements and co, yes, like we sourced our own raw materials and we developed products, but still, right? There are existing co-mans out there. You go to them, say, hey, try it with this, raw material. Why don't you use the whey from New Zealand that is way cleaner, etc. It's still pretty straightforward. So you basically, like within 2-3 months, you build a website, etc. You're live. You can sell to customers. For us, we spent all of 2024 basically in private alpha. So we had customers trickling through every month because like one of my mantras is like have real customers pay you real money if you want to get real feedback. So I'm not a big fan of this, you lock yourself in the basement and just work on a prototype forever. I think it's great to get real customer feedback. So we had like 10 customers trickling through every month, but we basically spent all of that year and Q4 in 2023 just building the product. So it just took very, very, very long to go to market and actually be able to scale the product. And again, in the end, it worked out well, but probably if we would have reduced the surface area, we probably would have been able to go to the market a little bit quicker.
I love what you just said about how you were making customers pay even though you felt like perhaps the product was obsolete. I meet so many entrepreneurs trying to get in tech right now, and they're trying to stay in prototype hell before they ever go to market. What's the danger of staying in prototype land versus what you just said about, no, go out there, get real customers, get real money?
I mean, it's the same thing. Like if you try to get feedback from friends and family, right? They're conflicted and they want to be nice, and in the end, it's not very nice. Exactly, right? It's great, and it's the same thing if you provide your product for free, right? Like if it's for free, people might forgive you one or the other things. I would say obviously there's also the other extreme, and I think we saw it in particular like last year where you had a lot of these, remember all these like small AI tools and stuff, like from the ex-Apple guys, and then there was this like Rabbit thing where you make them pay full money, you basically go fully live and you have a product that is absolute horseshit. Probably also not the smart way, right? I think the reality is somewhere in between. And again, I think the risk is just if you're too long in prototype land, you just don't know what's really happening out there in the real world, right? Like, then at least go live and discount it a little bit. I think it's still better than just doing it completely for free or just, getting prototype feedback. I do believe there's a lot of magic of just being close to the market as early as possible.
What's the approach to selling in that situation? Because obviously the branding's still being developed, the product's still in alpha state. How do you communicate for someone to want to purchase it in that state?
I think that actually validates that you have problem market fit, right? Like even if your solution is a prototype solution and is, not polished yet, like if it truly solves a problem, you will still have people that are interested in that. I actually think that like if you do that, it might actually even prevent you from sticking too long for something that does not work.
Wow.
And again, same thing, right? Like I've seen that with a bunch of startups. They raise crazy seed rounds, build forever, go to market, nothing there. It's a big problem. I actually believe, if that number on your bank account is going down and you have to be out there with the customer, at least, you get validation quick enough, right? And I think in the end, right, like entrepreneurship, again, to my point, is about taking risks. It's about going out there, right? Much rather find out that it's not working quickly and move on to the next thing than dabbling in something forever that's not going anywhere.
It reminds me of a story of PayPal, and early days, Elon and their team had a story where a customer asked them, hey, can I just send money by email somehow? And they had not yet had the function to do that. And one of the programmers said, yeah, that's easy. I could program that. And then that became the entire intellectual property of the platform. How many of those experiences did you have by having customers using the platform before you were out of the prototype phase?
Yeah, 100%. I think real-time feedback is amazing. And I think like also just, I would say in particular, just hearing common threads. And to be honest, it's even still the case for us now that we have 10,000 plus customers and we actually like now have 80 plus FTEs in our company. Like I still try to stay extremely close to the customer. I read every feedback that comes in. I care deeply about that. And what I just really look at, like what are the common threats these days, right? Like just what is the next area to go after? And like what is the new problem to solve for? Like one of the things for us, for example, right now is women's health, in particular, perimenopausal care. Very, very underserved currently as well. And lots of, females in their 40s, 50s struggling with, like symptoms and co there, and there's not really a bigger solution. Obviously, again, there are, clinicians that do it, but on a larger scale, it's still untreated, in particular from this holistic approach, not just medication, but basically married with lifestyle changes, etc. And that's, something we identify through the requests that come in on the daily. So yeah, 100%. In the early days, I think it was just more like, what are the features people want to see? Same thing, like what are the biggest problems, right? But for us, it checked out, I think, very much with what are the biggest health problems in society, right? Like, I think people are just like, hey, everyone who's in their 40s, 50s knows someone who had a sudden heart attack, right? So a lot of people are just like, hey, I really want to know how my heart health is looking like, right? Like metabolic health, right? A lot of people just, have suboptimal body fat and co. They want to have solutions for that. So there was definitely a lot of interesting feedback, in particular, I would say, for tech and the usability of the platform. But I think the overall product vision and what kind of health problems to solve, it checked out very much with what was out there already.
I've got a picture in my mind. It's almost like a customer or a user on the platform is pushing something in a certain direction, and then you're building around them.
Yeah. I would say I would caveat it, though, that in particular, when you're building new things, it's important to speak to the customer. But sometimes, I think Steve Jobs also said that, I think sometimes the customer doesn't even know themselves what they want.
Yeah.
So I think you also can't over-index. And so in particular, when you're building truly novel things, I think you just sometimes also have to take a certain stance and move it into a certain direction, because the customer can't imagine what the end state is going to look like. So again, I know it's a bit confusing and contradicting what I said before, but it's really like navigating. Like, I think that the reality of a startup is you need to make quick decisions with only having 20% of information available at that point of time. And I think the one thing I learned is, and I think one of the mantras and one of the reasons why I think we're doing quite well as a company is just like, we rather make a wrong decision than no decision at all. Obviously, there are certain decisions you shouldn't get wrong, but in the end, it's just about fast iterations, just learning. The worst thing is if you stall for too long.
That resonates. I'd rather make the wrong decision than no decision at all. Where has that shown up in this business for you?
Pretty much every week, every day, right?
Still.
Yeah, 100%. Again, I think if you want to move forward, it's really about pushing urgency. So actually, my co-founder Sam has like created custom hats in our office where it says urgency in front of the hat, because that's like my slogan. I just think like if you are not yet a big company, your main advantage is speed. And that's exactly what we're after. We just try to have the closest iteration loops. We try to ship things very fast. Whenever someone comes to me and is like, hey, I want to do that Friday in 4 weeks, I'm like, why not tomorrow? And I think, again, that is really what drives the business forward.
4 weeks tomorrow?
Yeah. No, but like often seriously, right? Like, I think often you just like have these mental blocks, and I'm not saying be delusional, right? Obviously, there's certain tech projects, they take 3-4 months, right? But then break it down. I think it's just really about this, like every day, hey, how can we be faster? How can we make quick decisions? How can we ship new things for the customer? Because again, like if it's new stuff, you will never get it right 100%. And sure, you have examples like a Figma that spent 6 years in prototype phase and, are like a multi-billion-dollar company now. But I would say that for the biggest amount, and, the most successful companies, they just ship features fast.
Now, being a founder, I've been in situations where my team have said, we want to do this in 2 months, like yourself. I'm like, why not now, tomorrow? And you get those looks of despair. You get the frustration and the tension in the team. What have you done in those situations to help navigate the culture in the team to then adapt into this urgent mindset?
I mean, I think it all obviously starts with the culture you set and the hiring you do. And I would say I'm very lucky that I have a pretty crazy and obsessed team. I think, the people who work for us are a little bit crazy in a very good way. Again, like I think very similar. Not everyone, has a personal story like mine, with my dad and co. But I would say pretty much everyone that works at Everlab is deeply aligned to the mission we have as a business due to several reasons. And that's just something where I think we're very, very lucky that we're not building, a new fintech company that, improves a certain process that, to my point before, we're literally saving lives every week. And I think that like helps me already a lot to get moving, that people are just very fired up, I would say, day to day, because it's basically it's like, hey, the faster we ship, the better we improve as a company, the more people we can really help, the earlier we can lower prices to make the service more accessible. So that, I think, getting people with the mission is really, really, really important. And then, as I said, like getting the right people. And to be honest, I think we have a bit of a reputation that we're quite hardcore as an organization. So like on the way in, we're quite open with employees coming in, that we say like, hey, if you're up for a cruisy journey, if you're looking for the 9 to 5, this is not the place. Like, we obsess about stuff. And, we're not the place where everyone every week works 100 hours a week, so to speak. But like, I would say all in all, we just expect a higher degree of output. And because we manage that expectation very clearly on the way in, people are okay with that. And what I just love to see, and again, I don't expect that. I think sometimes it's also good to shut off for a bit, but a lot of my people, when they're on vacation, right, it's still like every 3 hours there's a Slack ping coming in and stuff, and that just shows me that they deeply care and they also just really enjoy what they're doing to be around. And that's also, I think, the thing that gets me moving, right? Always tend to say, like, next to like my daughter and my wife, there's nothing in life that gives me as much joy and pleasure than building something from scratch. It's deeply rewarding.
Now, I want to understand what you're talking about here with speed and urgency. People have this proclivity to think of speed and urgency being messy, chaotic, and not premium. How do you balance a business that is both premium and moving at speed?
Yeah, very good question. I would just say limit surface area when experimenting. So one of the things we do, for example, is we have the option to roll out new features incrementally. Meaning, for example, we're right now in the process of integrating wearable devices into our service. Absolute nightmare, right? Like, now you've got, 20 plus different devices, from the Oura Rings to the Whoops to the Apples to the Fitbits to whatever, right? Lots of edge cases, lots of things that are going wrong. And we just have the opportunity to say, okay, show this feature in our app to 0.5% of customers. Okay, try it around there. You have the first 10, 20 people, so you can stay super, super close. You manage the expectation with the customer. Hey, you're a beta customer. This is a new feature. Things might go wrong. Please tell us if you see issues. Then we have a product manager, stays very, very close. His or her only job is talk to these customers, make sure that if things are going wrong, we fix them up. Once we have that, we gain a little bit more confidence that the feature is more robust. We roll it out to 1% of customers, 10, 20, 50, 100, bam, out we go. So just being a bit smart with things, because I completely agree with you, just pushing speed and having messy solutions, in particular in what we do, where we just, we deal with people's life, basically, in many of the cases, right? Like, I think often in startups, you talk about 80-20 approach, right? Like, ship an 80% solution because, the last 20% takes you 80% of the time to get right. We can't do that for some of our features, right? Like, for some of the things in particular for us, like clinical escalations, meaning, a test comes back escalated, we need 100% solution, because we're just, one, we care about the customer, and two, just also legally speaking, we're on the line here. So I think it's really about navigating the things right, setting up a certain set of boundaries and rules, and then navigating within them is probably the way to go.
It sounds like you've certainly got a lot of moving pieces in this company. In your mind, how do you compartmentalize all the moving parts? Do you put things into categories, buckets, and how do you make sure, being a lead of a business like this, that you're not dropping the ball on anything?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's about setting up first of all, I would say the right organizational structure, right? Like, being very, very clear who runs what, who's the person responsible. My co-founder always has this great phrase, one throat to choke. So that's a good one. No, but like in the end, right, there's a lot of truth in there. If you have 4 people responsible, it makes it very, very tricky. I think you just need to be clear for all of the core processes in your business, who's the person ultimately responsible.
One throat.
Exactly. One throat. That's what it's about. So I think 1, build up the right organizational structure. 2, document all of your key processes in the business. And then 3, I would just say, like, the way I interpret my job usually is like I tend to look for every given week what is the biggest problem in the organization right now, and that's why I try to focus my time on. And I think it is impossible for even an organization our size now already with 80 plus FTEs to be on top of everything at all times. Sure, I have my KPIs, I have my dashboards, but again, I'm not in the weeds for everything. So I need to spend my time wisely. And again, that's what I mean. Like I try to spend it on the biggest problems at any given week, try to help the team solve it, and then rely on my people on the right data to make sure to see that, other areas are, still performing well.
Now, when you're trying to pick that one key problem every week, how do you pick which one it is? And how do you make sure you're not getting distracted by something that might appear to be the most important thing?
Well, I would say one, I feel like there's also a tendency with a lot of founders these days, I think, to just focus on the cool things and, just like that, build their personal brand and all that kind of stuff and being out there and posting and co. And I just think it's a completely wrong way to go about things. So I think focus on the relevant stuff, then to have the right data in place, which is also very complicated actually to set up. Our business is very, very complex, and just like stitching all the data together and really having the right data for each individual department is quite hard. But yeah, like I would usually say, right, like if operationally everything is going well, I would tend to focus more of my time on growth. Then, like once we see a lot of growth happening, usually the second, third order consequences is like, oh, we need to hire a lot more clinician. Oh, our customer service team is getting under pressure. Oh, we need new diagnostic partners. And then really focusing my time on there again. And yeah, like I think like whenever things are looking seemingly well, it's more like product vision, what are the longer things, where can we expand, etc. That usually, but every week is crazy. There's always something happening. I think it's also one of the realities of, the life of a founder. Things will blow up every day. And you just need to find solutions and power through.
How do you find your way of getting motivated on those days where you're expecting a ton of stuff to blow up at any given moment? How do you get into the right flow state or the right mentality?
So first of all, like I think very cliche, but for me, it's really like just moving in the morning. I think that's for me really the number one thing, like going to the gym or going for a run or something. It's just like, I know it's very, very cliche, but for me, it makes the biggest difference in the world. Just having that little bit of time in the morning just really helps me to, sweat a little bit, be awake, be ready for the day. I feel like the days where I don't have the time for that, I just always feel a bit like, And then I always tend to say that the great thing about being a founder and building a business is you have the highest highs and the lowest lows. And the highest highs feel so great because you had the lowest lows just before, right? So again, it's hard for me as well, right? Like in particular, there's some weeks, and usually it just also like, comes at the same point of time. It's not like there's one problem every week, but it's sometimes like 1, 2, 3, 4 double punch, right? Like left, right, center. And it's also hard for me. As I said before, I think now that, this is my second company and I've just seen a lot of stuff, I think I'm a lot calmer than I used to be, so to say, where I just try to stay rational, just find a solution, be okay with with the heat. Like, yeah, thing is just you need to find ways to stay calm. I think that's what it's all about. As I said before, I just think I'm lucky that I have a higher risk tolerance and tolerance for pain probably that, makes it power through. But I think it's just because then the wins are just also so rewarding that I feel like you're also fine with the blows, if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense. Now, one thing I want to understand is your perspective on entrepreneurship. Do you think and believe that everyone could potentially become an entrepreneur?
Well, no. I think it's very, very clear, right? Like, I think, let's put it like that. I think everyone can become one. As I said before, I think it doesn't matter out of what industry you come, if you went to uni or not, right? Like if you finished high school or not. I think like there's enough examples that whatever your background is, whatever you've done, like you can build a fantastic organization. But I think what it comes down to, as I said before, right? Like, can you deal with everything that, building a business comes with, right? And that's like one, putting in the hours, working very, very hard, right? Like not having time with your friends and family, going through, the mental pain, right? It's very, very hard. Like in my particular situation, right? You know exactly, if you don't solve a problem, no one else will, right? And there's no one really you can, quote unquote, like you can ask for help, but no one will understand it as well as you do, right? Like obviously you can talk to other founders or to your investors, but in the end, like you need to solve the problem, and that can be incredibly emotionally taxing. So I just think, gotta be ready for that. And I just think a lot of people probably are not willing to do that.
What are the things that you think people are not willing to do that are sacrificial as an entrepreneur?
I mean, again, what I said before, like I don't have a day off ever, right? It doesn't matter if I go visit my family in Germany, like I'm online 24/7. Doesn't matter if it's Christmas Day, if it's vacation, whatever it is, I am around. And some people might say, well, maybe you're just obsessive and the company would still work. But to be honest, like again, if you really want to push the envelope and build something truly big, and again, I think it's also fine, right? Like there are also, I think, quote unquote, lifestyle businesses. I still believe that you need to put in a lot of work, but if you just say, hey, I built this and I'm okay, to cap out, I don't know, let's pick a random number at like 10,000 a month or something. Obviously, you can probably set it up in a way that works a little bit better. But like my ambition here is really to build like a 10 billion plus company. And I think that just requires incredible work ethics, right? And for me, that's just like I work every day from, 8 a.m. in the morning till like usually 11 p.m. in the evening. And that's can be painful. And I think not a lot of people would want to do that.
Now, I'm sure you would agree that stress and cortisol is the body's way of preparing for an attack. But as a founder, stress never really leaves the room. What does living in a permanent state of fight or flight do to the human soul?
I don't know. I just always tend to tell myself, even if everything goes worse, if the company goes bankrupt now, everything, is over on that side, it's still okay. I'm alive. I have a beautiful daughter. I have a wife. I live in Australia. I can go to the beach. I think that's probably sometimes really helping, right? Like, what's the worst that can really happen? But yeah, like it can be stressful at times. I think it also comes in waves, right? Like obviously when we run a fundraise process, it is very, very intense, right? You talk to 5-6 investors per day, you get a message, the fund you thought they're really bought in, they pull out of the process. It's a real punch into the gut. And I can tell you, I also feel it then. Like our last fundraise, there was a period which is actually quite quick, where I think it took until everything was done like 4 weeks or something. But like I can tell you, after that, I also feel it, like even physically, right? You don't sleep enough, the mental stress gets to you, and then I also need to pull out a little bit again, right? And look after yourself. I think like if you just run at the absolute maximum, like I don't know how a person like an Elon Musk does it with all these companies. Like I think you need to be truly crazy as a person or on substances. Like I don't know how it is. So like I think there are also certain waves. I'm not, I also can't run, 100% all year round.
Yeah. Now you run a health company and you've seen the data, and you know exactly what cortisol does to the body. So is there any internal conflict whatsoever around running red this hot as an entrepreneur versus the data you've seen in your own company?
Yeah, I do think that stress is definitely a big killer, right? It's not the best, but again, right? Like I do truly enjoy what I do. And again, obviously, I'm lucky that I run this company, so I can also, I have access to very good, so I can see before things are going very wrong. But no, I had it. It's actually quite funny. My co-founder Stephen, our chief medical officer, he was just in the Daily Telegraph in an article in UK and was basically saying the number one most important thing is sleep, right? And I was just hitting up the next day. I was like, dude, like. You send me messages at 2 a.m. Practice what you preach, right? So it's obviously sometimes a little bit conflicting messages here. And yes, I do believe that anxiety, mental stress, etc. is not great. But again, I think for me personally, maybe it's just how I'm wired. I just also get a lot of joy out of it, and maybe therefore it's not as bad as you might think. But I'll report back in 50, 60 years and see how it's
At least you've got the data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
Do you think stress is necessary for high performance?
With urgency being one of my mantras, yes, it probably is important, I would say, right? Like, again, if you want to do great things, and that's just, that's just what capitalism is, right? There's competition everywhere, and I think it's also the same thing for us, right? Like, we were the first in our industry, and I would actually say we almost created a new market, or at least we grew a new market from something very, very niche into something bigger. Like, yeah, obviously, right? Like, we are now getting chased, and there are new companies coming up, and they try to do what we do. We have a lot of copycats out there, right? Which sometimes can really frustrate you, right? And with AI, all that stuff just gets easier and easier and easier, right? You see a competitor, oops, their website is exactly the same like ours. Well, just throw it into an AI tool, and you can't really do something legally against it. So you continuously have, I would say, the stress, quote unquote, to move forward, to innovate, to build new things, to have the best service out there. And the past tells stories, right? Like, no one would have thought that Nokia mobile phones are not the leader in the market, but then Apple came around and Nokia was dead. That's what a capitalistic society is about.
I would agree. Now, how do you look at the dichotomy between good stress that can help with performance and bad stress that can deteriorate it?
Yeah, I think obviously mental health is, I think, a big topic, and I do think that for founders, I think now it's talked about a little bit more than it has been. I think what's a great development, like a couple of friends of mine who are founders, like actually more and more I do see, doing some sort of coaching in a way, right? Because I think often it's just, as I said before, it can be very, very lonely being a founder, because you need to make the calls. And I think one of the areas, I feel like a lot of founders struggle with, right? It's your baby. You build it from scratch, and I feel like you want to be liked by your employees. But actually being the leader in an organization means you need to make tough calls. I think if you don't make tough calls, you have a big problem. That's just, again, the reality. And I think, again, you are in this moral dilemma, and I feel like that's actually often the reason why a company fails, because founders just want to be liked and are too nice and don't make the tough decisions that need to happen in a business. And therefore, again, I think mental health is important, and it's cool to see that more and more people actually have a leadership coach, and even if it's just once per month or something, checking in. And every person is different. I had some too. For me, it's more like I have a group of old, uni friends, and I'm happy if I do a bit of shit talking and go out for a beer or something. That's what grounds me. But I think it's incredibly important to watch out. And I think if you clearly see the signs, I also see them, right? Like, it's also just physically speaking. I'm unfortunately not 21 anymore. I've got 2 consecutive nights with 4 hours of sleep. I'm cooked.
A fun story here is Cam and myself, the producer of the show, have spent quite a bit of time in Germany, and I agree, you guys are some of the best shit talkers in the world. For real.
Absolutely.
World-class shit talking. I love it. Now, having been a second-time founder, there's obviously lessons that come with the first round. What were some of the things that you wanted to leave behind in the first business, and what were some of the painful lessons that you brought with you into the new business?
So number one, I think, just having gone through the journey, I think once is really the mental resilience that you've just seen a lot of shit and you just know that you can resolve it. I think that's probably the number one thing, honestly speaking. Even, on top of the actual lessons or concrete tactics you maybe don't do anymore. It's really this I've seen that. All right, let's relax everyone. Let's find a solution here. Just that calmness. maybe it also has to do with me that I'm a little bit older. Maybe that slowed me down, but like I really like notice it now. Serious problems last time, this time, totally different mindset. And I think that just like helps. So that would be one. Then I think more technically speaking, for me, it's also maybe this time just having a bit of a greater vision. And I think, just thinking bigger, thinking a little bit more long term, probably also has to do with the fact that, I did make life-changing money with the first exit. So I think that financial component is a little bit less important, which again, I feel like gives me a bit more superpowers to just, go after the big prize, so to say, and not be too careful. And then from the tactics, I think everyone says it the whole time, but hiring, incredibly important. That's where you can stuff everything up, right? Like you need to hire slow, fire fast. There's a lot of truth in there. Unfortunately, in our specific case, we've just been growing insanely quick last year, so you can't hire slow. So, you need to hire fast and need to make the right decisions. But again, like for us, I think we were very, very clear the second time around. Who are we? What's our culture? What's important to us? So that like if we are in that hiring process, even if it moves fast, we still, I would say, have a pretty high hit rate and identify, is this someone that fits into the company or not? To be honest, we also made some mistakes. And here again, to the point of being liked versus doing the right thing for the company, I would say we also, quote unquote, correct these mistakes very fast. So we also had some hires of, I would say also important positions where I pulled the plug after 2 weeks. I just think, if you know what, this is wrong. And to be honest, like coming back, I said this before already, your gut feeling, trust it. I think as a founder, you will never have 100% clarity. If your gut says no, it's usually a bad call. Right? Even if all the data points into a different direction, whenever I had a bad gut feeling, things didn't work out. So that's the second one. Third one would be probably just organizational structure, a little bit of like, processes and co, even though it sounds boring. If you grow fast, like having that in place is important. Like we did same thing with my first business. Like again, I was very, very young. I managed people very, very early, and I made probably all the mistakes in the book, and probably didn't have enough structures and rules and processes in place, which now I think we're a little bit more ahead of it.
If we get into some of the micro details on the three things you just talked about, one being perhaps your nervous system or your mental states in the first business, and in the second, I've gone through an experience probably in the last 3 years where I just get more and more calm about things and more neutral. Rather than having the big highs and the big lows and the big emotional roller coaster, I'm trying to kind of keep it as straight of a line as I can. What are some things that you were able to learn in that first business that were like principles or mindsets or quotes or things that you held on to that would help with that adaptation?
Maybe to go a little bit deeper the first time around, quite interestingly, if I look at the curve of emotions there, and again, I think it also has to do with the fact that I was very young. I was actually very relaxed in the early days of the business because my mindset was just, we're early. If it doesn't work out, who cares? I can still get a job. That was kind of my mental mindset, which like really worked out pretty well. I was the most nervous the last couple of months leading up to selling the business. Because, then your head goes, hey, I've absolutely killed myself here for 6 years. I took a really, really shitty salary, right? I had a lot of opportunity cost. Well, all my best friends did their party masters in Barcelona and like Paris and co. I just like slaved away. Don't fuck it up now. You're so close to the finish line, etc. Like that was literally, and it's interesting, right? Because it sounds a bit like counterintuitive because, like also with that business, we were very big. Let's put it like that. The numbers are not disclosed, but, we're talking big numbers here. And from the outside, you would say these guys are killing it. But again, right? Like one of my sayings is also yesterday's success is tomorrow's enemy, right? Like the expectations just go up. And I think that's the crazy part about business, right? It never stops, right? Like you hit a new record month. Well, you're on. Next month you have to go over it. So I feel like from the outside, many people would say, oh, great, they're killing it, everything is awesome. But I think for us, once we then also entered these like negotiations stuff, and yeah, like that's where I was most nervous, and I would say like mentally speaking, the most stressed ever. The goalpost always moves, right? In particular, once you have investors in your company, feel the public perception about funding rounds is fundamentally wrong, right? Like everyone's just always like, hey, company XYZ raised 100 million at a 1 billion valuation. Actually, this can kill a company, right? Because now, like if you raise that money and it's just, there was a lot of competition, you work in, the fancy new AI field. Sometimes this stuff happens and you're actually doing, 10 million of revenue. So it's great that you now have this valuation, but now you have these investors in and they want to make money with this investment. So you need to grow into this valuation. If you don't grow into this valuation, you're screwed, right? Like there's absolutely zero you will get out of that as a founder yourself. So I think that really is the thing about like at least venture capital funded or in general, I would say like businesses with external investors, that there's this notion of up. And yeah, it never stops. It's exactly the thing for us. I can tell you we had an absolute lights out January just now. Tick 1st of February, you are like, we're back at zero, right? Like now we have to beat January. So that is, I think, something you just, same thing, need to have the right mindset because it just always keeps going.
Now that relentless pressure of performance in a setting where you're getting a large valuation can optically on the outside look like success.
Exactly.
But internally in a company, you're saying it could be the death of the company. What exactly do you mean? What are those risks of getting a high valuation and getting cash injected into a business?
It obviously depends how that deal is structured for a founder, right? So sometimes when you have these crazy rounds, like what happens is founders take secondaries. What that basically means is the company doesn't just like get cash in, but basically the founders are also able to sell a portion of their business. So there's been some of these crazy stories, in particular around 2021, 2022, right? This post-COVID period, 0% interest rate. You just had so much money bubbling around where some companies, like I know from a few examples where exactly that case happened. The company was doing like 10 million in revenue and they got a $1 billion valuation and an investment of like 80 million, 100 million into the company. So obviously the company is never ever worth $1 billion if you look at any kind of public comps, right? Like the multiple is just absolutely absurd. Now, obviously, you can say it's great for the founders if they can also, sell off 2-3% because they make life-changing money and, that money is safe no matter what happens with the company afterwards. But again, right, like now you need to grow into this valuation. And for example, all of the employees, I think that's something that's not really talked about often enough. I feel like a lot of employees, stock options can be quite complicated, right? And if I now come in as an employee after this crazy round was raised, because obviously if you have a lot of cash, what's the next thing to do? You hire a lot of people. They now come in on this valuation. So if you don't in your next round get a higher valuation, all of these stock options are worth zero. So again, now the pressure is on to grow into this valuation. And now the thing is also for these funds, if they write checks like that, if they see you don't have the potential to grow into that, they will just also leave you hanging, right? At one point of time. And I know it also from some friends that are in companies like that. They're just like, in the board meetings, the guy is, not even listening anymore because they basically like written us off. And that's the dangerous part about it. There are also other examples, right? Stripe, for example, is like one of the most valuable private companies. They also raised a crazy round, I think, in 2021 at almost 100 billion valuation. But they then raised money again, I think, like last year or the year before, at a valuation lower than that $100 billion. Because they just like didn't grow enough as a business, and the public markets, right? Interest rates went up. Multiples were not as high anymore, so they just couldn't get the valuation anymore. Now for that company, right, Stripe is powering pretty much like 1% of global GDP. They were able to continue growing, and actually I think like just last year now, they raised the valuation higher again, so there it worked out. But there are also some other examples, like for example, a British company, Hopin it was called, they raised like I think an $8 billion valuation round during COVID for some video conferencing tool or something, and the thing is worth absolutely zero now. Everything is over. I think the founder made some money because he sold off, I think, 20 million pounds worth of equity, but everyone else out with zero.
How much do you think of these public displays of valuation are PR stunts, marketing tactics, and so such?
Yeah, of course. Like it does help, right? Like obviously that's why it's out there as much. And then I think on top of it, in particular, when you talk about the venture capital world, the power law is the number one thing about that. Meaning these venture funds, they place 20 bets, and their main rationale is that they don't care if 19 of these go to zero, but that one thing needs to have such a crazy outcome that the whole fund gets paid back. That's basically the whole model about venture capital, so to say. So they are just incentivized to go into the best companies out there, and that's why there's then a lot of competition. And then obviously, right, competition drives up the entry level price, and that's what you see playing out. And it's just getting crazier and crazier. Look into the US and all of these LLM foundational model companies, right? Anthropic, OpenAI, right? Like the amount of cash an OpenAI is burning is eye-watering. There's never been anything like that in the past. Still, right? Like every 6 months, there's a new 50 billion round. It's getting crazier and crazier. But same thing, right? Like AI is probably the biggest bet there is right now, and there are 4 or 5 companies that seem like they can win in this space, and that's where the money goes.
Now, I understand that you like Stoicism. So the Stoics believe that temperance, restraint, was a cardinal virtue. In the startup world, we worship excess, more capital, and higher valuations. What's been your experience with having restraint in your businesses in these situations?
I think it is very important. I can also give you a great example here. We just moved into a new office, and someone sent me a bill for 2 video conferencing setups with TVs for 10 grand plus, and I was like, no way I'm gonna pay that. This is insane, right? We can do that for 2 grand. So I personally believe it's incredibly important. Again, obviously, that's why you raise money. I think you need to go big. You need to go for the big bets. And for us, for example, that means we believe that moat comes via the technology. So, we invest into our engineering team and co. But that does not mean it's a free for all. And I'm actually pretty stingy, I would say, when it comes to some of these things. Not everyone needs I just feel like whenever you have a startup and they raise a lot of money and you come into the office and they have the fanciest office and flat screens everywhere, that's usually a very bad sign because they're focusing on the wrong thing. So I do believe restraint is incredibly important. As I said before, in our early days, if you see your bank account and there's not much in there, it can also really be a catalyst to get moving. Again, it needs to be, I think, on the right level, so to say. And, think also if founders, have existential fears, I think they're probably also not making the best decisions in the world. So to my point before with the secondaries, I actually think it's a good thing if founders are allowed to sell off small parts while the company's valuation is growing. Because again, right, that's the one thing their net worth is in. I think it's actually quite good if they can sleep at night because they have enough money to take care of their family. So I think it's somewhere in between there. But yeah, I completely agree. I think staying on top of your costs, not doing crazy things, is important.
What are other places in people's businesses that they should try to exercise more restraint?
I think in particular, cost, right? I think margins is one of the most important things in the world. Probably I would say that one overlooked area no one actually always talks about, which I think is really, really important, is actually raising prices as well. I think that's usually the one area people don't like to touch because it comes with a lot of blowback. But just look around, right? We have a capitalistic society that's supposed to have 2% inflation. Unfortunately, we didn't have 2% inflation over the last 5 years. So I think in a lot of businesses, in particular when you talk about low margin businesses like e-com and co, I think you just have to continuously raise your prices in order to survive. And I think that's just something that a lot of people don't touch.
Now, you said that there's blowback in these situations. How do you better prepare for those moments where you increase the prices and then you get blowback?
Just think have a plan ready, right? And have great communication. I think so much can be always solved by having the right expectation management going on. And I think in particular, if you run a smaller business, just be honest and transparent, right? I think like that's what usually works really, really well, right? Like you get a lot more slack than a Woolies or a Coles, right? Like people, if you tell, hey, this is my business, I have these and these people, and my supplier increased the prices by 10%, and that's how my margin profile looks like. I think a lot of people are totally fine with that, right? Like I think actually that will get you happier customers and more brand loyalty, right? Because you actually give them a real view into your business and you as a person, right? I think, in particular with a world where AI slop is, everywhere, it's, real human faces, real human stories are even more valuable. So that's what I would do. And to be honest, I think actually a lot of our problems in our business are also communication errors.
What do you think are the biggest errors around communication?
I think just spelling things out. Like one of the other things that we constantly talk about in the business is I always call it TikTok brain, right? People just don't have attention anymore, right? Like, I'm guilty as well, right? We all have screens everywhere, short form video, right? Like, I think like what was the number again? Like on Instagram stories, the attention span is 0.5 seconds. So just people don't really pay attention, and we just noticed it, right? Like in everything you do as a brand, in every communication, be crystal clear, make a statement, use the simplest language possible, the least words possible, just really make sure and repeat it 3 times probably, right? And it's really the simple stuff. And then it's probably also just under promise, over deliver, right? For us, that is, for example, hey, when we run some advanced blood tests, they just take longer in the lab, right? Hey, go out, tell the customer, hey, this might take longer than your average Medicare test because it's an advanced test and the lab will take more time to process it. Please expect 10 days. And then if you deliver it in 5 days, actually the customer feels amazing about it, right? Because now you over-delivered and set the expectations at the get-go.
Do you find that when you have as much momentum as you have now, that things get a little bit more complicated because you have more optionality?
100%. I think if you're doing, like, again, right, like if you're doing too many things, you have the risk of just spreading too thin and then not doing them properly anymore. So yeah, for sure. Guilty as charged. I think that can be tricky. On the flip side, startups are also a momentum game, right? So if things are going well, team is motivated, the vibe is really, really good, just you maybe have a bit more confidence and the things you touch just tend to work out better. Like I think it's a really, really, really big thing in startups. Like having that momentum and building on it is very, very magical. And actually, once you lose momentum, it's quite hard to get it back, right? So it's probably somewhere in the middle, but I would probably say like it's more positive than negative, having a lot of momentum and having opportunities than not having them.
If someone's thinking to themselves right now, geez, I would love to have some momentum and some good vibrations in my team, what are some things that people can do to start fostering good momentum and good culture, to start building into momentum for their tech startup or anything that's like that?
Try to start with the North Star, the big goal, so to say, and then try to break it down further and further and further, right? Like obviously, I don't know, let's say your revenue is not growing. Obviously, it's tough then to say like I get momentum through more revenue growth, because there's obviously probably some reasons why the revenue is not growing and you first need to find solutions. But what I would try to do then is just go some levels deeper there and just find out, okay, what can we actually do that is maybe like an early indicator of getting more revenue, and try to focus the team on that and try to hit that milestone. And once you hit them, even though maybe like you're still not happy deep inside, in particular as a founder, and be like, shit, like I'm behind my revenue goals, at least, get the team motivated by, hey, we actually, I don't know, now launching this new product, or, like we now have this, I don't know, like upsell opportunity or whatever it is, right? Like, and be like, hey, awesome, we hit that, good. Now next one, let's go there, let's explore this new marketing channel, et cetera, et cetera. So really break it down and just also celebrate the goals. I think that is incredibly important. And I think, again, coming back to life as a startup founder can be quite lonely. I think it's just also sometimes putting on a show, right? Don't carry it into the room. I had a lot of moments where internally I'm like, shit scared and I like things are not looking great, but just don't share it, right? Like lead with positivity. It's way easier than carrying it in.
Easier said than done, I would agree. How do you, as a founder, not carry the burden of your own stress into the room with your team?
It's incredibly tough, as I said. Everyone needs to find their own ways there. As I said, for me is, for example, really go for a workout, knock yourself out there, and then go in and I don't know, take the right breaks. Maybe just also, I don't know, do a day of home office if you're in a really bad mood, right? Like sometimes you just cannot put on a show, then, maybe reduce the likelihood of showing it to the world.
It can be tough for founders because sometimes their friends don't understand what they're doing. Yeah. Sometimes their spouse might not understand. I would imagine many people would feel like their team should understand. What's been the ripple effect you've seen when founders have perhaps shared some of this bad energy with their team?
I think the problem is just you always need to understand as a founder, no one will care as much as you do. And I think it's also a big mistake to expect your team to care as much as you do, right? Because again, obviously, if things go well, you get way more out of it than the team does, right? So I think that is very, very important. And I've seen that go wrong where people are just like, hey, why don't you grind like I do? That wrong mindset. Again, I think manage the expectations on the way in, what you expect. But again, like no one will care as much as you do. Really, really important to just be always clear about that fact. And again, I think like pulling negativity in there, I think it destroys everything. Right? Like, and I'm not saying again, like to my point before, of like you need to make unpopular decisions. For me, that doesn't contradict itself. I think you can make tough decisions and still lead with positivity. For me, it's just like, hey, nothing is working. Like, why don't you do a great job? That I think is the exact wrong way to go about things. Like, call topics out, but then do it in a constructive way and actually bring ideas to the table. Or just also be transparent if that is the case and be like, hey, clearly what we're doing is not working. Let's do a brainstorming session and let's find ways to improve things. That's probably how we'd try to go about it. And probably the number one thing I would suggest founders to do, and I know it's sometimes a little bit hard to your point, but again, I think, it's 2026. We've got the internet, we've got social media, you can connect with people. Just talk to other founders. And in particular, talk to founders that are maybe one step ahead of you. And it is absolutely amazing. Every popular startup that you hear in the news and the press and so on and so forth, it's an absolute shit show inside. It's like, literally, like, it's just like, it is chaos building something is going wrong. And no matter, right? Like, even if it's like a Canva or an Atlassian, right? Like the biggest of the biggest, they're like super successful. They will all tell you stories where like everything was going wrong and they thought the thing is gonna, hit the wall running. It is very, very helpful sometimes to just hear that from someone else and just understand, hey, they went through the same pain and they also thought that, there's no solution and somehow they found a solution. That helped me a lot.
It's helped me a lot. I would agree. And I think I've found some of the best counsel in hanging out with other founders, like you said, not too far ahead, but a few steps ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Now, with the team dynamic, let's say someone is keeping their drama at home and they're bringing their best self into the workplace. If the team don't care about the goals as much as you do, what do the team care about, and how do you create an environment that will motivate them?
Most people care about what they do, and I think also care about delivering great work, learning, progressing. To my point before, obviously, if you have a great mission as an organization where people can get behind, I think in particular the younger generation cares a lot about that, right? And it can be, like in our case, like helping people, but it can also be sustainability, right? Like I think there's a lot of different missions people can get behind. It's probably my leading point. Then two, as I said, like people care about doing great work, just like giving them the opportunity to, produce great output, and then just also calling it out. And, like people are proud if they shipped a new feature, a new product, etc. Like in the end, like people really like that. And three, just progressing, right? Like learning new things. One of the coolest things we have done over the last 3 months is basically we now have a setup where pretty much all our employees can vibe code. new tools. And it's actually amazing to see that we now have, people in our growth team or in our ops team that, are now actually programming quite impressive features that are kind of like embedded into the overall thing. Like, and one, it just made our organization 10x more efficient, but two, people just also really, really enjoy doing that, right? Like, wow, I can actually, create this little mini app. It's so cool. So I think it's just really like the basic things people really, really care about. If you give that to them, I think, happy days.
Do you think that the traditional job titles in your industry are changing? And what I mean is, in our media team or in our copy or strategy team, similar things where we're vibe coding things, we're testing things, it's becoming more difficult to write job descriptions. Have you seen a shift in how you think about different titles and ranks and structure in your company?
Absolutely. And I think things are just starting to move. I think what I see happening, obviously, and again, it sounds so cliche, but you just need people that use AI. I just feel like you're going to be left behind if you don't do that, and really try to embrace that and also force people into that. It's sometimes very funny. I have some employees, I think like every message they send goes via AI cleanup before. So sometimes it's very funny. So like, that's not you. That's not how you talk, right?
Yeah.
So these are the hilarious parts of it. But to be honest, I'd rather see that than someone not using AI at all on a full day, right? So no, 100% things are changing. I do believe that, with the way technology is progressing, what you really want is people that have ideas, people that have initiative. That's what I really, really care about. And I think you just see it very, very clearly, right? Like, we have some people that are extremely junior, straight out of uni, and their impact and the things they're shipping is absolutely amazing. But like, same thing here, they're young, they're hungry, they want to learn, they want to do things, they love it, and they have a massive impact. And I just think, again, right, like with the tools being easier, it's not so much about contextual know-how, but it's just more about, your internal drive, I would say.
What's been the weirdest change you've seen in how people operate in a role inside of a company?
I just believe there's more and more overlap happening now, right? Like, I think Marc Hermann just said that on a podcast the other day, right? Like, the designer can now code, the engineer can now design, and the product manager thinks they can do it. And then everyone's kind of like, who will survive? Mexican standoff, so to say. I think we're still in the early days. Like, to be honest, I think AI is one of these topics. It's like, on the one hand side, like, really changing the world. And on the other hand side, I think it's just incredibly overhyped and not quite there in certain ways. So I think, again, you're running a media company, you probably know it yourself. Most of these like video generation tools and stuff, I just still like, again, you just need, like, I feel like for some of them, you need to put so much work into prompting the machine that it's actually better to just get a video editor to do it themselves, right? Like, again, I think it will change, but today I think sometimes it's not quite there yet. So I think how it all will play out, probably give it another like 12 to 18 months. What I'm like a little bit scared about is really how is the world gonna look like in 10, 20 years. As I said, I got a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm sometimes really thinking like, damn, when she's like graduating high school, what to actually do, right? Like, what are the jobs gonna be? Like, I just think the world's gonna be a very, very different place.
It's going to be a strange place.
Yeah.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old son, and a newborn, and I ask myself the same question: What are they going to do? Yeah. We had a good friend of mine on the podcast months ago. His name's Vince LeBon, and he's an amazing designer, and he runs the brand Rolly. Yeah. And he said something quite interesting. He's like, look, for a long period of time, it was very valuable that people could be creators. You could create code, or you could create design, or whatever. He's like, it seems like now we're moving into that overlap, like you said, where it's more about curation, having tastes, having the ability to pick and cherry pick things together. So I'm seeing a lot of that in our team here as well.
Absolutely. Completely agree. I think it's about having a vision, so to speak, right? Like, I think really people that can imagine things, right? Like, to my point before, spot a problem, imagining a solution, right? Like, I think that is like, if you got that skill set, very long, these people.
No, it's been fun seeing other people from different departments experiment with each other's stuff, and then honestly gather a new appreciation for what that person also has to do. Now, when you strip back everything you're doing right now, and you think about your higher self and what motivates you, why are you doing all of this?
Getting to the deep part now. For me, there's nothing more rewarding than building something with your own hands, right? Like, I think that is probably, I would say, like the deepest level I can get it to. Like, for me, it's just absolutely amazing. As I said before, we have 80 FTE now. Again, like my last company, I think we were 230 when we sold the company. For me, it's just a little moment, right? Like having a Christmas party, seeing all of these humans saying like, hey, like actually work here. We created that from nothing, right? Just with an idea. I think that's absolutely incredible. Hitting new revenue records, building new product, seeing, okay, it's now, right, these 114 people's lives saved, like just unbelievable, right? Like that's where I feel true joy. And then, maybe the spicy part of the answer is I also really hate losing. I've just always been a very competitive person. And for me, it's also, right, like business also has this element of a game there, which I just like playing, as I said before, right? Like just constantly getting challenged, having to do new things, having to invent yourself, moving forward, right? Like I have some people in the team, they're very annoyed when they see a competitor copying our stuff. And I always say, well, our job is at the point they copy us, we have the next, fundamentally better thing live. So they're always 6 months behind.
When you look at the landscape and you start seeing the competitors move around, and I understand that you're doing very well here in Australia and you're looking at the US and you're looking at Europe, what comes to mind when you start thinking about, okay, there's these bigger markets with these bigger players that have more resources. Where does your mind sit when you think to yourself, we're going to have to get some kind of advantage?
I would probably start with saying like our space is very, very hot right now. And I think it's also a big mistake to look too much at the competition. So little fun story, when we launched Everlab, Eucalyptus, not sure if you're familiar with them, like one of the biggest healthcare startups here in Australia, they launched a service called Compound, which had a lot of overlap with what we were doing. It like was a little bit like different in certain areas, but like it was quite similar target audience, etc. Like everyone sent me everything from them. Right? It's like they're doing this. Hey, that's their newest newsletter. Hey, that's their product roadmap. Hey, they're doing this, etc., etc. Actually, also a lot of our investors, where I was like not smart from the investor, right? Because you just drive us crazy. And actually, in the early days, we made some mistakes because we were like, oh, these are the big guys. They have big money. We should be doing that as well. Big mistake. So I think, yes, look around, see what the competition is doing, but I think also don't over-index on it. I think like do your own thing, go your own way. I think you just drive yourselves nuts, and I think there is risk to make mistakes. So that, I think, to preface your question. On top of it, I would just say, yes, you need to find an angle to deliver a superior product, and of course, distribution matters, right? So I think there's also incorrect notion to say like the best product will always win, right? Because distribution makes a difference. I think the best example is like Slack and Microsoft Teams, right? Microsoft Teams, everyone hates it, but if the corporate has the Microsoft license, right, they're going to be using Microsoft Teams, right? So it definitely does matter. But yeah, it's like what's our way? How can we build the best product, and how can we present it the best way to our audience? And I think if you do that well, you will see success. Again, follow your own path. Don't get crazy. Do your thing. And yeah, for us, like another point for us, like it's also, I think a lot of people in the early days when we started thought that the product is just for the young Brian Johnson tech bro kind of person. It was like, oh, but like your whole branding and core is not that like cool and techy and stuff. But I just very early had a hunch that this product can be for a wider audience. And I had a hunch that it's just more demand in an older geography, and you actually push that geography away if you're too techy in your communication. And that was exactly right. Big win here. So again, I think big takeaway is know what you're good in, trust your strengths. Again, obviously, look around, but don't over-index.
When you were positioning yourself from the branding lens, the design, the logo, everything you've created, it's gorgeous branding, by the way.
Thank you.
I love the logo. Whoever did it is fantastic. The brand feels good. It feels pioneering, futuristic, but like you said, not too techy, not too crazy. What were you thinking about the brand Everlab when you were putting the design system and the strategy together?
Yeah, so it's actually been like an iterative process. So we had a different logo and a completely different like style guide before that, and it's actually quite funny because like one of the best friends of my wife is a designer, and she was actually like helping from the get-go, so to speak. I think the problem was, and to be honest, I actually forced her in that into that direction. So shout out Sarah on me, where I think like initially we went a little bit more with like the whole color scheme and co into the Bondi Beach Pilates studio vibe, so to say, where we then realized after some time, maybe not the best thing. And then we actually worked together with an agency, and well, I can tell you the thing there was still pretty early days. Like we got a really good deal, I think, just because they liked what we were doing, good showcase. So, and we were, I think, probably the most annoying customers ever because I deeply care about that kind of stuff. So like the whole like branding, visual language, like I really care. So I think we dragged this project for 5 months and had so many cycles going through it. Also, the logo as it stands today, there was so many iterations on it. So I think this is just like one of these areas as well. Like when I said before, startup is 80-20, but I think there's certain things that just matter. And I personally thought, because historically speaking, I think most medical brands just don't do a very good job. That was like one of the areas that if we get it right, we really have something that is a competitive advantage. So yeah, was a longer process. I know at the agency quite well, but I think the outcome is great.
It's a great outcome. Now, what I find is when founders who are pioneering new territory in business do branding, they tend to put a lot of their DNA in the design or the aesthetic or the name. What were you trying to put in the brand from yourself when you were reestablishing it?
I would say I'm guilty that I'm a bit of a lifestyle victim. I definitely like the finer things in life, so to say. So I think just like, I think it's just premium look, aesthetic, right? I think in particular, if you just look around like medical imagery, I don't know, try to find like great photos of someone in an MRI scanner, right? You will always have this like very bluish kind of like overlay over the images and co. And I think like for me, it was just like, hey, how can we actually make this aesthetic, right? Like how can we, transport a sense of lifestyle in there? And like I always tend to get inspired by other industries. It was the same when we launched our supplement brand. I drew all of my inspiration from fashion and beauty, right? Because these industry back to, again, 2013, those were the only industries that, were really ahead and, already building this. Like, I mean, Instagram only started becoming a thing in 2014, right? So also very, very early. It was just like, hey, draw inspiration from other things and how can we actually use that to redefine our industry? So I usually never, draw inspiration from my own industry, but I try to do it with other industries around that, right? Like sports, fitness, travel, etc.
The argument typically with some clients in the medical space I've seen is that they want to look safe and trustworthy. Yeah. What's your opinion on pioneering the visual identity in a system that has been more traditional and still maintaining safety and security?
We have that discussion actually quite often internally, and again to that whole like tech bro kind of positioning I alluded to earlier. That was, for example, something where we just said like we just don't want to sound too young, for example. Like I see some of our competitors of ours and they're then like dabbling in the Gen Z lingo, right? And it's like, here, advice for looks maxing, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, well, there goes your medical credibility, right? So it's, Yeah, I think you just like need to find a good solution. Again, right? Like I think what we internally always tend to say is like we're a serious medical service. So I think, for example, when it comes to the language we use, that shines through, right? Like I think people still care a lot that they can trust us. But I think, for example, in the visual direction, why can't you take a beautiful photo of an MRI scanner, right? Like why not? Actually, it helps because, with this like bluish kind of hospital lighting, it actually, yes, it might look medical, but it's also a little bit like cold and maybe even turning people away. Like, why can't you take a photo with like warm lighting? For example, right? It's a very, very simple, very specific example, but I think all of these add up and just like then generate a world in itself, right? And if you come to our website, yes, it might not look like your average medical service, but then you scroll through it and you see, oh wow, they have like 100 doctors and they're all accredited and they all went to top unis and stuff. Cool, I'll check it out. And actually, I think it also helps to just differentiate, to be like, hey, this is not my everyday place. This is actually something truly novel. I might check it out.
I think novelty is important when it comes to branding, and I think novelty is more valuable in many cases than looking quote unquote trustworthy. For yourself, one final question we like to ask everyone in the spirit of the show, which is about, for us, not just being a guy myself who runs an agency, but people who like to take agency. And like you said, you really don't have an off switch. When you think of taking agency, what does that mean to you, and where does that come from?
Right? Like, I think it's just about what makes you truly, truly happy, right? Like, I always ask myself this question, right? Like, when I'm hopefully, 80, what do I care about, right? Like, what will make me look back and say, like, hey, I had an amazing life, right? And therefore, I just think, yeah, that can be for someone working a 9-to-5 job, but, having 4 kids and spending a lot of time with the kids. Like, I think that is absolutely amazing, and I think should be actually celebrated in society. And for other people, it can be like, hey, I have a chip on my shoulder and I, want to build $1 billion company, and that's what I'm about. So I think that for me truly is agencies, having a set of moral standards and outcomes and unapologetically following that.
I truly believe that you're unapologetically following your own vision here, and what you're building is epic. How can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Easiest is probably just on LinkedIn, Marc Hermann, Marc with a C. I know everyone gets it wrong in Australia, so see that. That's probably the easiest part. Can also just shoot me an email. It's like marc@everlab.com.au. Hit me up.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and just such a valuable conversation about how you look at business and what it really takes to do something new. We would certainly love to have you back in the future, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.